Hey everybody, I'm going to talk to you about Operation Bojinka today, and it was a planned series of terrorist attacks for January of 1995. The plot involved three separate elements: the assassination of Pope John Paul II during a visit to the Philippines on January 15th, the bombing of 11 airliners on January 21st and 22nd, and the flying of a Cessna airplane filled with explosives into the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Operation Bojinka refers to only the most deadly element of the plot, the plan to destroy jumbo jets in mid-flight. All the targeted flights were transoceanic routes between East Asia and the United States. All had two legs, and the plan involved placing bombs aboard the planes on the first legs and then detonating them on the second. Operation Bojinka was abandoned after an apartment fire in Manila on January 6th. Which led to the discovery by police of evidence of the plot. And we'll talk more about the apartment fire, because there's a lot of details concerning that. So, the plotters were all members of Al-Qaeda. We're all fairly familiar with that. And they were based in Sudan. It was developed by Al-Qaeda operatives. There was several players, a lot of players, but the main guys, and I'll just talk about the main folks, Yousef and Khalid Sheik Mohammed, while they were in Manila, Philippines in 94 and 95. So let's jump right into phase one of the plot. The details of phase one were found in the evidence discovered in the investigation into Route 603, and that's why I was talking about the apartment fire, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit. Prior to 9/11, this would have been, if Bojinka would have been pulled off, it would have been the most devastating terrorist attack in terms of casualties. The first plan was to kill Pope John Paul II when he was visiting in the Philippines on January 15th, 1995. A suicide bomber would dress up as a priest while the Pope was in his motorcade on his way to visiting the Federation of Asian Bishops conference. The assassin would stick a bomb inside one of his sleeves of the robe, then use a disguise to get closer to the Pope and detonate the bomb when the Pope approached to kiss him. The planned assassination of the Pope was intended to divert attention from the next part of the phase. About 20 men had been trained by Yousef to carry out this act prior to 1995. So now let's move on to the next plan that would have involved at least 5 Al-Qaeda operatives, including Yousef, Khan, Shah, and 2 more operatives. Starting on January 21st and ending on January 22nd, they would set bombs on 11 United States-bound airliners that had stopovers all around East Asia and Southeast Asia. All the flights had 2 legs. The bombs would be planted on the first leg. When each terrorist would disembark, he would then board 1 or 2 more flights and repeat the process. After all the terrorists planted bombs on all the flights, each terrorist would then catch flights to Pakistan, and they never needed visas because they only stayed on planes their first legs in Asia. United States Airlines had been chosen instead of Asian airlines to maximize the shock towards Americans. The flights targeted were listed under operatives with code names such as Zayed, Majboz, Obaid, and Obaid, who was really Abdul Hakim Murad, M-U-R-A-D, was to hit United Flight 80. And then he was to go back to Singapore under another United flight, which he would bomb as well. Zayed, the code name Zayed, that was to hit a Northwest Flight 30. The bombs would have been timed before the operatives stepped off the planes, and then they would have blown up over the Pacific Ocean and South China Sea almost simultaneously. If it would have worked, several thousands would have perished and air travel would have been shut down worldwide for days, if not weeks. The U.S. government estimated the prospective death toll, it would have been 4,000 or more if the plot had actually been executed. So let's talk a little bit about the bombs that these folks were cooking up. And all of this is going to sound too familiar because it's what we look for every day. The Mark III micro bombs had Casio digital watches as the timers, stabilizers that looked like cotton wool balls, and an undetectable nitroglycerin as the explosive. Other ingredients included small parts of sulfuric acid, nitrobenzene, silver azide, liquid acetone, and nitrate. Should be all very familiar to TSA folks. 2 9-volt batteries in each bomb were used as power sources. The batteries would be connected to light bulb filaments that would detonate the bomb. So the batteries were taken from children's toys. The wiring would be attached to the arm of the watch using a tiny space under the calculator. The alteration was so small that the watch could still be worn in a normal manner. And then Yousef actually got batteries past airport security during his December 11th test by hiding them in a hollowed out heel of his shoe. He also smuggled nitroglycerin on board by putting it inside a contact lens solution bottle. Doesn't that sound familiar? So let's move on to Phase 2, the CIA plane crash plot. Abdul Hakim Murad, I had mentioned him earlier, confessed the details of Phase 2 in his torture and interrogation with Manila police after his capture. Phase 2 would have involved Murad either renting, buying, or hijacking a small plane, again filled with explosives, and then crashed into the CIA headquarters in Langley. He'd been trained as a pilot in North Carolina and was slated to be a suicide pilot. Murad probably created this version of the plan, okay. There were alternate plans to hijack a 12th commercial airliner and use that instead of the small aircraft. Testing explosives. Let me back up here about the alternate plan. They were going to do a 12th airliner. Let me move on. A report from the Philippines to the United States on January 20th, 1995 stated what the subject has in his mind is that he will board any American commercial aircraft pretending to be an ordinary passenger. Then he will hijack the said aircraft, control its cockpit, and dive into the CIA headquarters. Another plot the men were cooking up would have involved hijacking of more airplanes, Sears Tower, Pentagon, Washington Capitol, the White House, Transamerica Tower, and the World Trade Center were their likely targets. So they were already looking at that, way before it ever happened to the World Trade Center. In his confession with Filipino investigators, Murad said that the Manila cell could not recruit enough people to implement other hijackings prior to the foiling of Operation Bojinka. And then let's move into the discovery and termination of the Bojinka plot. Everything that I'm going to mention is back in Manila in the Philippines. And like I said, the plot was abandoned after a fire in an apartment in Manila on January 6th. The fire occurred before the attempt on the Pope's life. And then it goes right into the apartment building fire, which I'll talk a little bit about. Apparently they started a chemical fire in the kitchen sink on the 6th floor of an apartment building. When they tried to douse it with water, smoke went all over the place, and about 11 o'clock at night folks started complaining about the odor. So the owner called the fire department, and actually the fire ended up going out unassisted, but Yousef and Murad were both there, and they told firefighters to stay away before they actually ran away. Police decided to investigate the situation and found 4 hot plates in their packing crates. Looked like cotton batting soaked in beige solution, loops of green, red, blue, and yellow electrical wire. The telephone rang right around the same time, and the police ran downstairs thinking that it was a trap. So after the police came back and discovered the evidence, they arrested a man who called himself Ahmed Saeed. Saeed claimed that he was a commercial pilot that was on the way to the precinct house to explain the firecrackers that he said went off. Saeed tried to run away, but he was arrested after he tripped over a tree root. Interesting little tidbit there. He was hauled to the precinct in a taxi van with the help of 2 other people. Saeed offered a bunch of money, a lot of Philippine pesos, US dollars. It was only 2,000 to the policeman if he'd let him go. Of course they didn't. Once they got him down there, he signed a statement saying that he was innocent and that he was a tourist visiting his friends. And then mumbled something about 2 Satans, that they must be destroyed. Apparently he was alluding to the Pope and America. So a little more detail about the evidence in room 603 that eventually thwarted the entire thing.